Hey everybody, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Dave said he's gonna. So that could be anything. He said he's gonna and he stopped and then he left. So
kill the neighbor.
Kill the neighbor. Well, oh no, that's saving the neighbor. He'll save the neighbor if it's convenient.
Feed the children in the basement.
If it's convenient.
Toss one off.
Yep, there you go.
Get a Diet Coke.
What's to come. Get a wine cooler. Get the best fries he's ever had. I'm glad that you cued in on the we're going to get a description of going to the bathroom because I thought that was a trope we've seen too. All right, so in the last episode, do you remember that? You were like, boy, I think we always get a description of somebody taking a dump or something.
No, it's 100% of the books. And I didn't know that until one of our editors about a year and a half ago left a comment that said, so this is the third book I've edited from you and Dave so far, and everybody's using the bathroom. And I was just flabbergasted that I had never noticed. I've edited everything Dave's written in a decade. So I had never picked up on this before, but sure enough, and then every new draft, even after he was made aware that this was a thing he was doing, all the new drafts still had somebody pissing or shitting or going into
It's
parties.
my secret signature. It's an Easter egg. It's for all my piss fetish fans out there.
It's like how every episode of Adventure Time has a snail in it. It's like something like that.
No, the reason is because so many of our episodes, like the person is waking up.
Okay,
When you wake up, the first thing you do is pee. I don't know about you. Do you hold it all day?
No, but see,
I just gloss right over that shit.
right. But the point is,
I'm in my characters' heads, man. I'm thinking it out. Like, what are they doing?
we're in our characters' heads too, but we're not always visiting the laboratory with them. This is the thing. But you did. There was even one where they were in the forest, and like you stopped so she could go behind a tree and take care of it. And it wasn't part of the story. It wasn't like they had to stop.
That is a Birdemic reference.
They heard
Becky.
noises. She's taking a shit. So, okay, the next one is...
I like how we just start these episodes off just trying to like make the show horrible. And then
Well, that's the idea.
Ourselves.
Trimming the tribe. Trimming the tribe. So the last one was on the last episode, if you missed it, go back, get the part one and some more heinous things to begin the episode. Just on how to know whether you're writing in the right genre, because a lot of people are writing in the wrong genre and don't know it. So this is, Sean asked half of a list of questions to kind of ask yourself to determine what genre maybe you should be in, and this is the second half.
Right, and so the first one here, we could start with Dave talking about piss, is what kind of scenes do I like to write?
Piss scenes.
Dave, what is it about piss scenes you like to write?
That's why Angry Birds was my movie of the year.
That's right. That's why I liked it so much.
Now I understand.
He was like, this movie writes like people think.
He's
Finally, something that taps in.
They were really in the birds' heads. They were really
something I can relate to.
Now, this is how you write a movie.
What was the question again, you bastard?
Well, I don't think he had a question, did he? He was just going to the next point.
No, what kind of scenes do you like to write? So, action, dialogue heavy, reflection heavy scenes.
I like a mix of all of it. I like dialogue. I like mystery. I like tension. I like people being scared. I like people facing like moral dilemmas. Like I like all of that. I like where somebody is. I like mystery, and I like people having to deal with some inner conflict, or two people having conflict against each other and trying to get over that.
Yeah, I think one scene that, and I'm not in your head here, I'm only seeing it.
If you only were.
I see it. I mean, both of you guys, I see the work after it lands on my desk. So I can, it's kind of easy sometimes to see, oh, this looks like you've had a lot of fun writing it. And something I can always tell that I feel like you've had a lot of fun writing, Dave, is these scenes that have like an escalation to them that's more interpersonal. So like, let's say a dad and a son are fighting, and it's real quiet at first, but like the father is getting this isn't even a specific scene I'm referring to. It's more of a tone that I see that you're very good at, and that I can tell you're having fun kind of playing both characters off each other. But maybe the dad is being a bigger and bigger dick, and then the son is getting more and more upset, and he doesn't quite boil over, but by the end, you know, he's right at the edge. And in an upcoming chapter, we're going to see the sequel to this, and it's going to be bad. And
I think of like a tea kettle sometimes, almost literally. And I think in the last thing I did, I actually referenced a tea kettle, like not meaning to like be too direct, but like, yeah, I like that. I like
no,
that.
but there is that Bolero quality that some of your scenes can have, and I always get the feeling when I'm reading those, oh yeah, he had fun. Like this was easier, right? You're fun. When I can tell you had fun, it feels like the writing was easier. There's less editing there. There's more natural voice, and there's less uncertainty from you. You don't hedge as much in your language when you're feeling confident, and I think you're more confident when you're having fun. And so, like, I could see that in those. Johnny, what kind of scenes do you? I know you love arguments. Like your arguments read beautifully.
Yeah, no, I like arguments. I like scenes where somebody is saying what there's a lot of subtext, where what is really being quote unquote said, what the meaning that is being conveyed is not conveyed in words. I like doing that. I also like trippy scenes, not over the top trippy scenes, but ones where just something's amiss, where something is, and there's a dreamy quality of prose that I attempt anyway to fall into when I'm doing that.
And you're really good at that. Those usually go really, really fast too. And I'm the same. I like stream of conscious and trippy. I like when something's a little off. I like when somebody's paranoid. I like writing paranoia a lot, actually.
Yeah, I usually like paranoia. There's one series of books that the paranoia was weird. It was hard to follow, but
yeah, that's the one I referred to last episode, actually, about like, you know, are you having fun or not? I don't think we had a lot of fun during that series. So I think that I think that really impacted the series itself. Like, I think the story is good, but I think the fun is missing, and I think it made a difference. And
it'd be a good book jacket quote. The fun is missing.
Right.
Well, yeah, but I mean, after this amount of time, you can't pretend like every project was a home run or was an amazing experience. Like we've had home runs and we've had amazing experiences, and that one wasn't quite that book. You know, same with us, Dave, right? We've had our books that like we're really in love with, and the experiences that we had that we were really in love with.
And sometimes the ones that, you know, feel like a foul ball or something wind up being popular with readers. So
yeah,
it's kind of weird how it all works out.
No, the key is to write a lot and to get good at it and to have your ear to the reader, because the reader will tell you, you know, what you're good at and what you're not, honestly. Okay, so here's an interesting one, I think, for all of us. What kind of pacing do I prefer in my storytelling? So, you know, we're all, I mean, there's a collective of three of us here, but Dave and I have a very different pace than Johnny and I do. So I think that really matters when you're picking your genre, because like, you know, Johnny and I, in fact, the trilogy we're talking about that wasn't as much fun is, as far as a genre, it's something that Dave and I do really well, which is that moving fast kind of thriller pace. And this was a thriller, but it didn't move fast enough to be a thriller. And our pace at Realm and Sands is generally slower. We have exceptions to that. And in fact, the thing that we just finished moves really fast. But generally, even our fast moving stuff moves a little bit slower than fast moving stuff. It has longer sentences, longer paragraphs, longer chapters. CI stuff, by contrast, shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, shorter chapters.
So you guys are taking like long leisurely shits while we're just going in there and pissing really quick, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you would say she took a shit, and I would describe leading up to it, and
it would start with the roll in her stomach.
And then she would think that something was a little wrong. What did I eat today?
Would she look in the bowl, see if there was corn?
But in all seriousness, when there's even in so I think Sean actually said something very similar to this a minute ago, is that I at least can write in a range of scenes. I can write really long, dreamy sort of sentences that just kind of go on and on, that create one mood, and I can create faster, clippier, page-turny stuff. But the stuff that I write that's fastest and clippiest is less fast and clippy than CI's default mode. So I forget. So I think that somebody might write, they ran into a room, shots were fired and ran back out. Whereas that would be a few paragraphs. I couldn't do that unless it was literally bang, bang,
Yeah. And CI might even be shorter than that. Inside, period. Shots fired, period. Back out.
Which I can do that. There are cases where I've done stuff like that, but it's usually in a longer sequence where I just don't want it to be 10,000 words.
Right. And there is that tonal. I would say Realm and Sands tends to have more rhythm because we do have really long paragraphs and then a short paragraph and then punch, and then you go longer. So it is a little jazzier in that way, where CI is very, very direct, for sure. But I think they're both totally fitting, but you have to find your sweet spot genre. Dave and I would have no business taking that CI aesthetic into a longer, more thoughtful, like literary type thing. It just wouldn't make sense. And Johnny and I need to know what we're doing and why we're doing it and when we're doing it, because we've had books that are beautiful. Like they are beautiful. They're passages that are just gorgeous. Two of our books that, I mean, to my mind, I'm in love with the writing itself. It just has really good writing. They don't move fast, and by they don't move fast, I mean both the prose and the sales, right?
Well, like they also don't. They don't move fast, but they do move smooth. Yes. So I would argue that the even the quote unquote slower action is still quick moving prose, or at least fluid moving prose.
It reads well, but for you got to think about what readers see too, and readers like white space. So not our series, they like it, but I mean they like looking at a page and seeing a lot of white space. It makes them.
I don't want a bunch of words interrupting my damn fucking book.
Readers don't want to see long, big blocks of text, especially if they're reading on a smaller device. One long paragraph could take up the whole page, and it's intimidating. So, if you look just visually at the imprint that you're getting from a Realm and Sands book, especially a more literary one, versus a CI book on average, there's a lot more white space there, and it looks like a book you can kind of fly through. And for the right genre or the right reader, that's encouraging. For the wrong one, it's like, oh, this is a really vacuous book. There's not a lot to it. So when you're finding your genre, you do want to find where are the readers who are going to appreciate this style of writing. Okay. How many sensory details do I naturally include?
Depends on the book. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the book. I think that sometimes, because there's that writing exercise that most of us were given in high school, where it's like, okay, well, so you're describing a scene, make sure you include all the 5 senses or 4 out of the 5 senses. And every once in a while when that's done, even if it feels maybe a little artificial to say, well, here's what they smelled, here's what they heard, it can, I think, really set a scene really well. But I don't make a point to do it in every case. And I think it depends on the state that the person is in. So if it's like a fast moving scene, they're going to be like, that's a visual mode. That just is a visual mode.
They're
whereas
stopping to smell the roses.
Right. Whereas, and I don't mean it is literally visual, but I'm actually referring that, I mean, using it a little more figuratively. It's like visual is like, that's just the frenetic pace is visual. Whereas kinesthetic is usually a slower, and that's where it's going to be more feeling based, both internal and external. And so I would say that interpersonal stuff that's not a fast paced fight, or certainly love scenes or something, those are going to be more sensory and kinesthetic.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I tend to use, it's funny. I think I'm a little bit like you in that way, Johnny, where I'll ignore it and then realize, yeah, I haven't been very sensory. So, but one chapter will use more of it and like make up for lost time.
Yeah, it does. It does. It doesn't seem out of the blue. It just seems like, wow, okay, now I know where I am.
I think it depends where the character's headspace is. Like if you're going to a restaurant for the first time, you're going to notice things you wouldn't notice the 10th time you've gone there.
How about a bathroom?
Yes. And in a book like Bird Box, where so much is blindfolded, then I would argue you need to be paying a lot of extra attention to
Yes.
what's felt and what's heard.
Yes, exactly. And for the purposes of this conversation, that's exactly it. If you're not somebody who likes writing sensory details, stay the hell away from a story like Bird Box, because it's your job as the writer to color in a lot of those details. I tend to use sensory details as like a shorthand for memory, or this person is they're sensing this thing and it reminds them of this other feeling, or I'll use it as callbacks or echoes. So if somebody at a beginning of a story experiences something and then they smell or taste or touch that thing later, then the reader is back to that other place that they were. So I think senses can be used in that way rather well. But if you're not somebody who likes to write sensory details, or you really love it, then find where you are in that spectrum to find what kinds of stories you should be telling. Because a lot of times.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you have to be careful how much you use, because if you overdo it, it becomes like exposition, and a reader's not sure what to pay attention to.
That's absolutely true. But there's some genres where that is the expectation. They want the exposition of sensory details. So you've got to know, like, because the thing is, you can be the exact same writer in two different genres and be really successful in one and be tanking in the other. And it's just because it has nothing to do with you as a writer. It has to do with the audience expectations, where you're spending the most of your time. And you make that mistake, it's just hard to recover from. And if you get it right, then like the journey is just easier because you're writing content that is predisposed for your readers to like. So what types of conflict do I like to write about? So I know we've talked many times about, Johnny really likes arguments, and we all know Dave likes to put children in jeopardy. But that's part of this, but bigger too. Do you like smaller conflict between individuals, or do you like more global conflict, between man and earth? We've made the case many times that all of our stuff is so character based that we don't really know how to do global stakes. That even when we have big giant a meteor is crashing into the earth, and all of that stuff, it really is about the families, right? We're always going to be more signs than Independence Day.
Yeah, I agree. I like small conflicts. I like inner conflict, people wrestling with their demons, such.
Well, yeah, and even when we've written stories with global scope, we like to reduce it to focusing on the actions that are actually happening with a small group. So the conflict and invasion is literally global, but we're always focused on a family. It's how it affects them. So there are people who are very good at writing, this one army is doing this and this other army is doing this, and the characters in it may or may not even really matter a lot during some of those scenes. I'm not good at those. That's not how I write.
Yeah, Johnny and I like giant conflicts. We get deeply personal with our characters, but the global stakes are often huge. Things tend to be more intimate with Dave. Conflicts are closer and darker. Often our main character's biggest enemy is himself, right? So like the conflicts, I think for all three of our stories tend to be just super, super character based. But even when, like Dave, it gets shrunk into it's almost insular. Like our main characters are always battling against themselves, internal forces as much as external. Okay, so what kind of personality traits do I like writing about?
Right, and are you talking more about like incidental things, like the gestures that they use and the way that they choose to organize their office or something? Or are you talking more like interpersonal?
I think like personality type. So the example I use in the article is actually from us. And
is it the fun, crazy, usually kind of sexually charged sidekick?
Yes, she's in here. Actually, what I did is I used LaFleur as a stand-in for a lot of the types of characters that we like to watch or read, which is strong women, essentially. I think that Johnny and I really enjoy that. And we have a particular book where it's just basically a setting for strong women. And this is not the genre that we should be writing in at all. But it's a good example of getting the personality traits that we like writing, and we could have moved them to a different context. But this particular story is about.
Well, I don't mean to sideline it, but I would argue that we should be writing in that, but not for commercial reasons.
Yeah, agreed. But if you're talking about genre therapy, it is commercial, right? So for the sake of this conversation, it absolutely is. We actually have a fleshed out outline that's a sequel to that book that I would love to write, like day after tomorrow. Like, it'll be amazing. But yeah, I don't think we'll sell a lot of it. It's not like Invasion. It's just not going to be. But I think if you look at some of what we did in that book, it makes its way to Invasion. But anyway, that book is filled with a lot of stuff that we like. It's got one of our best female villains. It has a great sympathetic lead. It's got, her, not trashy exactly, but definitely loudmouth, energetic friend. And those are kind of like
inappropriate.
Inappropriate, yeah. We like a friend who says a lot of inappropriate, shocking things. That's always fun. What kind of personality traits do you like, Dave?
I typically write. I have two different ones. Like, basically, somebody in abuse situation, somebody rescuing somebody else, abuser. Like, I write about a lot of horrible people, and like, I think I have like a vigilante mindset for my stories and my heroes. Like, I just want everybody to fuck shit up and bring down the bad guys.
Dave, you write about broken people. I would say that's
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another personality type / trope that is definitely a Dave standard. And it's the character who spends too much time working and not enough time with their family. And that is like.
So Dave wrote the Lego movie.
Yeah.
I did love that about the movie.
Yeah, no, that's a character that is probably, even if it's not a main character, exists in 50% of our stuff. Like that element. That's
I hate my tropes, man. I gotta get away from them.
Well,
like I write about the things that bother me. I think that one is the only one that's really like me and all of our stuff. Most of the stuff is like external shit that I see that I can't do anything about. That one is like my own shit, and I hate when my own shit's in a book.
Well, it's about 50% right now.
Oh, I got to change that up.
But yeah, I think
I'm writing strictly childless people from now on that don't ever worry about anything.
I think writing personality traits that are like that when you know what kind of personality traits that you like and what genre expectations are, that helps you find your space. And again, this is about how do I find my space so that I'm not working so hard. Because I don't think any of us listening to this actually mind working to write a story and get it out there. It's that the market is super saturated and it's impossible to get eyeballs. So how do you make that a little bit easier? Well, that's alignment, I think, in this instance. How can my unique experiences and background as a human being influence the stories I'm going to tell? I like how these are actually conversationally stacked. So we were just talking about that with you, Dave. You do have that stuff that you're working out. Like, I'm working too much. Am I spending enough time with my family? Am I going to regret the amount of time I'm spending with my family later? Because I think that's the common.
Or now.
Is
Can I spend less time and more time working?
So is it like, for me, definitely, I mentioned this earlier. I just finished a story about a guy who, is working with a marketing firm that puts product placement in his memories. Like, my unique experiences and background as a copywriter helped me to, have a lot of fun with that. It made it an easy story to tell. Johnny's got a genetics background, and that's made it really, really great for stuff, like The Beam that we've done or Dead City. So between both of you, what are your unique experiences that you like putting into the books that we write?
I mine from, so two things. Number one, I do have a lot of biology and psychology that sneaks into our books because I have degrees in both. But I would also say that I have a just-in-time component. So this actually didn't sneak into one of our books because it just didn't fit, but I could see it's the sort of thing that would, like the next day, is for my son's last birthday. We did one of those indoor skydiving things, and I was like, if I had been writing something where I could have included skydiving or indoor, like, then I would have. If I have an experience, it's likely to show up in a book within a few weeks, something new, which is why I like to go out into the world and learn and try new things. So right now I'm learning to play piano. That actually hasn't shown up yet, but I could see something about, and it's usually nuance. It's usually like something that people don't realize about something. So I can't think of a good example, but like if there were a skill that I knew and most people had a perception of one way, then I would kind of delight in pointing out like a one little eccentricity without being like I'm teaching them, just because it adds a little bit of veracity. It's like, oh, okay, that's something I didn't know, and only somebody who was into it would know it, and just gives the character a little bit more depth, I think.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with that. I'm constantly skimming from the surface of my life. So if I have a conversation, I write every day, so it's very easy for me to put that in and put that in and put that in. And it's funny because when I'm reading stuff that's a couple years later, anything from, at this point, 5 years later, like we've got books that are 5 years old now, and I'm rereading them and I'll remember, it's almost like I'm leaving Easter eggs for me to have memories, right?
Right, like you wouldn't include something ridiculous and trendy like Pizza Rat.
Right. But now here's a place where we diverge a little bit, because I know that we do this and Dave does not like this at all. But Johnny in our stuff will put jokes for each other constantly. That are Easter eggs for us that make us laugh. The reader will probably miss it. And if they get it, we figure, okay, you got it because you got it for a reason, and that's awesome. But they are for us, and we'll do things that are ridiculous. In the last book that we wrote, it's a little trilogy, and it's got this whole thing going on with beaver nuggets in it. Now, beaver nuggets are from Buc-ee's. If you don't live in Texas, it's this big gas station.
They're basically like corn pops.
Yeah,
they're diabetic comas in a bag.
Yes,
yeah, they really are.
Dave, do you like beaver nuggets?
Yeah, and I got some last time I went to Texas, and I made the mistake of eating a few too many, and my blood sugar went on 400 something. I was like, I'm not eating those ever again.
Yeah, they're really, really bad for you. So Damon Courtney gave us some at the first summit.
Yeah, why didn't we cast Damon Courtney in that book?
I don't know. But Josh came to a genre therapy thing back in, I think, November, and brought some beaver nuggets. And we just think they're hilarious. And so beaver nuggets became like a huge element in this story that we wrote.
Which we managed to play straight while also being fun. It isn't, I hope it isn't stupid. No, but it's also not, I wouldn't say that it's like straight-faced either. Like it's clearly a joke, but hopefully in a way that isn't stupid.
Right, and that kind of stuff.
I don't allow any camp in my stories.
No, Dave really doesn't. Sean's not allowed to have any fun.
Yeah, it's not camp. Like that's the thing. We pull it off with storytelling integrity, which is kind of the challenge, and it's one of the things I think both Johnny and I enjoy about it, is to take this kind of ridiculous thing and make it serious and play it straight.
To me, the story is sacred. It exists, and when I try to insert something like that, I feel like I'm betraying the story, the world, and the characters by introducing real life and breaking the fourth wall. I don't like it.
I hear you, but like,
I'm just saying my preference. That's all.
I totally get it, but that's the whole point of these questions, because the better you know yourself as an author, the more you're not going to misstep. And I think the first several years on all of our sides, what we did is a lot of experimentation. But I think now we're in a space where Johnny and I know who we are as authors. You and I know who we are as authors. So it's just a matter of leaning harder into those identities, not trying to conform them to anything they shouldn't be. Okay. This is a very good one. Am I a plotter or a pantser?
Why is that relevant to genre?
Well, because I think some genres, like you can't, like, okay, romance, right, has very, very tight plots. If you're writing a mystery, like especially like a procedural mystery, you kind of can't make that up as you go along, right? The body needs to be found right away. There are certain elements that the tightness of that story is kind of dependent on like, can you imagine King trying to write a procedural the way he doesn't map out, and then he gets to the end and he's like, fuck, who did it? Right? And then he's trying to like write around it to make it all make sense, and then that's why you get these really convoluted endings with King. And it's fine because that's kind of his voice, and it is part of his style. But if you look at like the way Patterson plots, he is very meticulous, right? So he may have 104 chapters, and one of the chapters only has a paragraph, but it's because that paragraph is conveying information that you need in his, tearing you through the pages kind of vibe. So I think where you are on that spectrum influences or should influence the genre that you tell, because if you're in a genre that expects tight plotting and you're kind of meandering all over the place, you're not going to succeed as well. If you're in a genre where you're allowed to breathe a little bit more, then that's just different. And I imagine at this point, Dave is, I think, out of the three of us, the one who's most resistant to outlining and most wanting to pants, but also probably has come the farthest from over to the other side of understanding. Yeah, if I have an outline and we really get to know the story, it does make a difference.
I'm a pantser. What I would, if like time wasn't an issue, what I would do is I would pants an entire first draft and then go back and outline it. I know it sounds a little weird, but that's how I would do it.
No, I don't think that's a bad way to write a story at all. You're basically writing a really, really long outline.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea, except that we do need more time to be able to buy that. And you would have to be able to not be precious on your rough draft. My worry is that you would be precious with your rough draft and then your revision, when it's like, well, you're not writing a rough draft, you're writing an outline, go fast.
Yeah. I find a lot of the story when I'm actually in it and I'm, dealing with the characters, what they're thinking, what they're saying, and that changes a lot.
Johnny, you kind of pantsed your last book, right? The one you wrote by yourself. How is that different from, because you?
Well, I get into binds if I do that. If I totally pants, I at least need to kind of know what's coming out of it. So I'm trying to think of exactly how I did that. So I wrote third of the book, maybe a little more or less totally pantsed, but not truly like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I did kind of know what was going to happen next, just not in a real firm way. And I certainly didn't know the ending. I didn't know the twists. I didn't know what was going to happen, the bad guy and all that stuff. And that got me hung up like pretty severely. But I will note that once I had the solution, which was the work of 2 hours of a phone call and another few hours of working it out on virtual paper, it actually didn't cause any problems. It's not like I had to spend hours and hours and hours and hours rewriting the book or anything. So the fix is actually pretty easy. It was like poking at a log jam with a stick until it breaks free, and then it's fine. So, and then when I wrote the last part of the book, it wasn't pantsed, but I had a better idea what needed to happen in, say, loose architectural form. So it was kind of between. I don't know if that helps any. So it's definitely not a real beat by beat outline.
But I also think, or do you think it's a fair statement that at this point, our natural ability to pants is, is greatly accelerated because
we're subconsciously thinking of the points that you need to hit.
We've finished enough books and written enough outlines that we have an outline going on in our head anyway.
Yes, but that said, I am more out of practice with that because you usually do that outlining for me, and I've gotten a little reliant on it as a crutch. And so I'm outlining the sequel to that book now, the one I did on my own, and I will do the next one on my own. And I am going to outline it more, at least in terms of the big things. Like I don't need to know, like, so the poor example of trying to describe what I'm talking about here is if the characters are on a journey on the road from New York to Los Angeles, I don't need to describe each city they stayed in and each day that they traveled, but but I do need to know that they're going from New York to LA, and that level of detail where, okay, this occurred, and then this person showed up and created a roadblock. Like, you need to know those things. You need to know what the resolutions are. I do need to know how the book ends, I think.
What kind of protagonist do I like to write about? So do you like more Walter White or like Dudley Do Right? I had a character in yesterday's Gone named Desmond that Dave immediately started calling Desmond Do Right because he was just a little too Boy Scout. And I know that across the spectrum with all of us, we really like our bad guys to be understandable, even if they're terrible. And we like our heroes to be, not quite perfect. So can we put a finer point on that? Or is that something that we've kind of beaten to death already? Is that, we like anti-heroes as much as heroes?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about it enough. Like, we like people with conflict, and that's pretty much all there is to it, really.
Okay, well then the last question here, which I think is a great last question, is what kind of subjects do I want to explore? And like earlier, Dave, you said and you've always maintained this, you write about the things that scare you. You write about the things that you don't have control about. Johnny and I very much write about the things that we have questions about in this world. Big things that we're trying to almost explain to ourselves, and we're using stories to explain them. Do you think either of those things are worth digging into a little deeper? Because I do think that's a good way to find your genre is, God, what do I want to say? What do I want to learn? What do I want to... And actually, Dave, I want to ask that. Do you ever... Because I know Johnny and I have picked things specifically because, okay, well, this would be interesting, and let's learn about that. We've even talked about doing that in the future. Let's go travel to this place and learn this thing so that we can write a book about it. Do you do that, or is it more like just-in-time learning where you have an idea, you have a story, you have characters, and now you need to go learn the things to validate that story? Or does it ever start with the thing that you want to learn about first?
Well, I mean, I have a natural curiosity, and like I read a lot of nonfiction stuff, and like it's usually, I think of like, how can this benefit my writing? There are places I would like to visit, so I could write about them in a better way. And
South Beach.
I've been there now. I want to go to Washington State, where we set white space. I want to have a better feel for the environment and the kind of people there, so it's not just like these stock characters from my head. So it feels more authentic in a way that some writers do. Like, you feel like you've actually been to that place, and instead of me making up fictional towns and shit. There's a lot of things, especially like the hard sciences and stuff, that I'd want to invest more time into learning, but I don't, because we don't really have anything that we're working on for that, and I don't want it to be like a time crunch, whatever. So yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's all my questions. I have 17 of them.
All right. Any final thoughts? So maybe the good way to wrap this up is, if you answered a bunch of those questions in a way, like, it's kind of like taking a personality test where the only person you're lying to is you, if you massage the questions. So if you found yourself, you write romance and you're listening to that, you're reading through that, and you're like giving answers that indicate that maybe you really shouldn't be writing romance, and you kind of fudge them and say, well, yeah, but I can also do that, then you're kind of defeating the whole point. And let's wrap this up by saying, what is the reason? So, like, let's say you are writing romance and you should be writing thriller. What are the perils of staying where you are stubbornly, and where are the benefits of acknowledging that you may need to switch?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And I think it's pretty straightforward. I think that even when you're successful, it's not as sustainable, because every project is going to be a little bit harder to write. And hard is relative, but it's going to be harder than what you would do if you were in your most native space. If somebody gives me an outline that is, has a subject I'm interested in, a protagonist that I can relate to, is tightly plotted, that uses my unique experiences, as someone who had several businesses or anything, it doesn't matter, with personality traits that I can identify, conflict that makes sense to me, just the right amount of sensory details. It's not overly flowery, but it is descriptive, moderately fast pacing with time to breathe and some, inner monologues. Let's see what else is here. Something that makes me happy when I write it, that I actually feel really good, that isn't too tropey, that has a slightly dark, maybe black or sarcastic atmosphere. Really, that's it. Then that story is going to write itself. Like, if I have an outline that fits all of that criteria, I can do 40,000 words in a week, and they're good words. If I'm in the wrong genre, or if I'm in the wrong space, I can probably struggle with 15,000 words. Like, it is for me, an order of magnitude difference between the hardest and the best. So I think asking yourself these questions, if it's in service of making writing more pleasurable and ultimately more profitable, it's absolutely worth doing.
All right. So there you go. Take the little self-quiz. Be honest. All that stuff. We'll have another scintillating but possibly insulting opening to the next episode, because that's how we roll here on the Story Studio podcast. Do you guys remember when we had sponsors? That was fun. There's nothing to lose in that.
I can't imagine why anybody would want to,
And I don't want to break confidentiality, but there was a lot of money. Like, what were they thinking? I don't know.
I don't think they were.
No, they clearly weren't. There was like the .com bubble podcast.
Very much.
All right. Happy to have ridden the wave for at least a little while. So thanks for everybody for listening to the Story Studio podcast. We'll see you next time.
Adios.